Thanks, guys. Hello, I'm Cameron Flatt, and welcome to Everyone's a Critic. After the nearly unanimous critical acclaim of 2013's 12 Years a Slave, including the Oscar for Best Film, a score of 97 on Metacritic, and a 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, any movie covering American slavery now faces instant comparison. As is the case with a movie released last weekend, The Birth of a Nation. Not only was my initial reaction that this was an attempt to capitalize off the popularity of 12 Years a Slave and our own culture's heightened attention to racial issues, but I am always weary of a writer-director casting themselves as the lead actor in what can easily become one big ego stroke of a movie. It is the toppling of these obstacles that makes Birth of a Nation shine brighter than it already does. The story is of one Nat Turner, a slave who acts as pastor for the other slaves on his plantation. After word gets out of a black man that can read and preach, he is quickly used to calm any thoughts of rebellion on other farms using carefully selected scripture to make it seem like the Bible encourages slavery. Eventually, Turner can no longer take lying to his own oppressed people, and after a cruel whipping for baptizing a white man, he decided to take his fate into his own hands. I expected Birth of a Nation to try to one-up 12 Years a Slave at every turn in a misguided attempt to be the superior film. More shocking violence, better gore effects, deeper writing, more heartfelt performances. Instead, it uses a focus on Turner's Christian beliefs in a surprisingly light tone at the start to serve as contrast for the later brutal moments that prompt our hero to action. These situations feel authentic and powerful thanks to characters that act like real people, aside from a few comically overdone southern plantation owners. The most impressive part of these performances is that they manage to be memorable and impressive while remaining subtle and convincing. The entire narrative works because it isn't trying to convince you that slavery is bad. It assumes you already know that. Instead, it tells you the story of a good man forced to do terrible things in the fight for basic human rights. My primary grievance with this picture, however, is that while it is chock full of great ideas, many of them are kind of glossed over. There is a friendship between Turner and his master that he grew up with that is briefly established and adds another layer to their eventual conflict, but is never really developed. The relationship between Turner and his wife is genuinely sweet, but the love at first sight cliche doesn't really feel right in this context. Worst of all, the climax feels a bit off. The build-up is extremely effective and the climax itself fits the movie's themes and purpose, but feels rushed and less thoughtful than everything that came before it. All things considered, The Birth of a Nation manages to be more than a simple 12 Years a Slave copycat, with its convincing cast, attentive use of varying themes and tones, and a focus on the hero's beliefs. Its only real drawback is that it has too many good ideas and most of them don't get enough attention. My recommendation is see this one for sure, especially on the big screen if you have an eye for visuals, because there are some scenery shots that will take your breath away. Overall, I give it a solid B+. Now back to our wonderful hosts.